The other day I was sittin' on the back porch, just lettin' the sun hit my knees like I always do after breakfast. I had a little cup of tea, and I was peelin' an apple not for a pie, just for snackin'. And I don't know what it was, the breeze, or the way the sun hit the curtain in the kitchen window, but all of a sudden, boom, I'm right back in our old apartment in Lviv. 4th floor, corner unit, smelled like boiled potatoes and furniture polish. Land sakes alive, I hadn't thought of that place in years. But there it was, clear as day. I could see Mama standin' there in her housecoat, hair pinned up, holdin' a hammer in one hand and a rolled up rug in the other, like she was goin' to war. A red one. The carpet, I mean, with those big, swirly Turkish flowers on it. It was the first one we ever hung up on the wall. And Lord have mercy, you'd think we were hangin' up the Mona Lisa, the way Mama fussed over it. I'll tell you what, that one silly rug changed the whole look of our home. No, I mean it. It wasn't just decoration. Back then, a carpet on the wall meant status. It meant we weren't just surviving, we had taste, culture, even if we didn't have a pot to pee in. Pardon my French. You young folks wouldn't understand. Nowadays you got your minimalist walls and open concept this and that. But back in my day, if your wall was bare, people thought something was wrong with you. Either you were dirt poor, or worse, untrustworthy. There was a saying, he has no carpet, what's he hiding? I swear I didn't make that up. That's just the way things were back then. And the funny part, I never questioned it. Not once. I just accepted that walls needed carpets the way windows needed curtains. But lately, I've been thinking about that carpet, not just how it looked. I still remember the pattern, every stitch of it, but what it meant. The pride in Mama's eyes when the neighbors came by and went, "Oh ho, Turkish?" And how Papa just shook his head, like he didn't get what the fuss was about, but then helped hammer in the nails anyway. And me, a skinny teenager with bangs I cut myself, talking my school photos in front of it like I was royalty. Funny how you don't notice those things when you're living only later, when the smell of apples in the air knocks the wind out of you and you suddenly remember the exact shade of red in that old rug, do you start to skin yourself? Why did that matter so much to us? Maybe it's silly. Maybe I'm just an old woman ramblin'. But I've been holding onto the story for a long time, and lately I keep thinking, maybe it's time I shared it. Not just about the carpet, no, but about everything it held. You see, that rug was more than a fashion. It was memory. It soaked up arguments and lullabies and birthdays and the way snow looked on the windows in January. It heard secrets whispered between sisters and felt the thud of Papa's boots when he came home tired, but still kissin' Mama on the cheek. So, if you'll sit with me a little while, I'll tell you the whole story. It starts with a market trip, a stubborn Mama, and a carpet too big to carry up 4 flights without swearin'. But by the end, maybe, just maybe, you'll see what I see when I look at that little scrap I saved all these years. Not just fabric, not just fashion, but a piece of who we were. Let's go back, shall we? Well now, let me take you back a bit, back to when I was just a young girl, growing up in that old 4-story building in Lviv. I was maybe 12 or 13 then, with dreams bigger than the city itself, though I didn't quite know it at the time. The world felt slower back then, but somehow full of little sounds and smells that stick with you forever. The creak of the wooden stairs outside our door, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery 2 blocks down, Mama's perfume mixed with the scent of boiled cabbage drifting from the kitchen. It was a small apartment, mind you, not much more than 3 rooms, but it held a lifetime of memories. We didn't have a pot to pee in, as the saying goes, but we made do with what we had, and oh, how we loved each other in that place. Mama, God bless her heart, was a woman with an eye for style even when times were hard. "Helena," she'd say, A carpet has to match the tea set. You hear me? She was proud and practical all rolled into one. She'd fuss over the little things, like ironing the curtains just so, and making sure the floor was swept twice a day. Papa was quiet, a good man, handy with his hands, but he never cared much for the carpet craze. Land sakes alive, he'd mumble, why hammer nails in the wall for a rag? But when Mama set her mind to something, well, that was just the way things were back then. So he'd take the hammer and the nails, and with a sigh, help hang that big, heavy rug up high on the wall. I remember standing by the window, watching the neighbors bustle about, wondering what the world outside looked like beyond our block. I was a dreamer then, thinking maybe one day I'd travel, see places beyond Lviv, maybe even America. But for the time being, my life was tied to that apartment, those people, and yes, that carpet. I believed then that kindness was the most important thing in the world. That people, no matter how far they wandered, always found their way back home. My little sister, Luba, was always running around in mismatched socks, a handful of curls bouncing as she chased the cat or tried to sneak a cookie. She didn't much care for the carpet, though. To her it was just a big, itchy thing on the wall. But to Mama, it was a symbol, a statement of pride. Our neighbor, Aunt Lucy, was a character all on her own. She had 3 carpets in her living room, one on the floor, one on the wall, and one draped over the couch. It's not fashion, dearie, she'd say with a twinkle in her eye. It's culture, it's respect. And boy, did she love to brag about those carpets. The rhythm of our days was simple but full. School in the morning, chores in the afternoon, Mama humming in the kitchen while Papa fixed whatever was broken. In the evenings, we'd sit around the table, the lamp casting a warm glow, and talk about everything and nothing. The carpet hung silently behind us, a constant witness to our lives, birthdays, fights, first crushes, and whispered secrets. It soaked up laughter and tears alike. Sometimes I'd reach out and touch it, tracing the patterns with my fingers, feeling connected to something bigger than myself. Looking back now, I realize how much that little piece of fabric meant. Not just a decoration, but a part of who we were. A piece of our story stitched into every thread. I was just a girl then, full of hope and innocence, believing the world was kind and fair. And even though life had its hardships, there was always that carpet, a bright, bold splash of color on the drab walls, reminding us that beauty could be found anywhere if you looked hard enough. So that's where our story begins, in a small apartment on the 4th floor, with a Mama who knew exactly how she wanted things, a Papa who quietly went along with it, and 2 girls dreaming of a world beyond those walls. And right there, behind us, hung that red carpet, holding our memories close, even if we didn't know it yet. You know, sometimes life throws you a curveball when you least expect it. I was just living my ordinary days back in that little apartment, school, chores, helping Mama with dinner, when suddenly, something changed everything. It wasn't a grand announcement or a flashy event. No, it was small, quiet, but powerful all the same. It happened one afternoon when I was walking home from school, my books tucked under my arm, head full of daydreams and school lessons. The streets were bustling, but my mind was somewhere else, probably thinking about what kind of carpet Mama would pick next or how Papa would grumble about all those nails in the wall. And then I saw him. Not some handsome prince or dashing stranger, mind you, just a boy from our neighborhood, but somehow he looked different that day. His name was Victor, and he lived a few buildings down, quiet and a bit shy. I barely noticed him before, but that afternoon, something about the way he smiled caught me off guard. My heart, well, it skipped a beat, or maybe 2. I couldn't explain it then. I just knew that sudden flutter inside my chest was new. exciting, and a little bit frightening. You know how that is? When something stirs you up deep down and you don't quite understand why. Mama always said, "Helena, you're too young to be thinking about boys." But what did she know? Back then, I was just a girl with wide eyes and a hopeful heart. I remember telling Luba about it when I got home, whispering so Mama wouldn't hear, "Luba, I think I like him." She just giggled and rolled her eyes, but I could see the smile on her face. Maybe she understood better than I thought. Papa, of course, never said a word. He just kept fixing things quietly, probably thinking all these feelings were just a phase. But to me, Victor was the beginning of something new, a secret world beyond our carpets and cramped rooms. At the same time, there was something else stirring in our home. Mama had her hands full, fussing over preparations for the big family gathering that was coming up, the kind where everyone from the neighborhood came over. The table groaned with food, and the carpets on the walls seemed to come alive with stories. It was her chance to show off, to make sure that every visitor noticed the Turkish carpet, the one she brought back from that little market outside town. "A carpet isn't just a carpet, Helena," she'd say with a wink, "it's a statement. And tonight, we make ours loud and clear." But that night, while everyone laughed and sipped their tea, I found myself distracted. I kept thinking about Victor's smile, the way the sunlight hit his hair just so, and how my heart wouldn't stop fluttering no matter how many times I told myself to focus on the party. It was like something had opened inside me, a door I hadn't even known was there. And for a girl who spent so much time watching the patterns on the carpet, that was saying something. There was also the neighbor, Aunt Lucy, who had a knack for stirring up the pot. She noticed my distraction and, with her usual sharp eye, leaned over and whispered, "Yum, love, eh?" Just like those carpets, it takes time to settle in, but once it does, it changes everything. At the time, I thought she was just being nosy, but looking back, I reckon she had a point. That little feeling in my chest was like the first thread in a new tapestry, one that would be woven with laughter, heartbreak, and hope. And so, you see, that day wasn't just about a boy or a party or even the carpets on the walls. It was the moment when my world shifted, when I began to see beyond the red rug, beyond the walls of our apartment. I was starting to grow up, and with it came a whole new set of dreams and fears. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew one thing for certain: life was about to get a whole lot more interesting. I'll tell you what, it's funny how the smallest moments can hold the biggest meanings. You think it's just a day like any other, but later, when you look back, you realize it was the start of something you never saw coming. And that's the story of how a shy boy, a big red carpet, and a crowded apartment all came together to change my life forever. Well, if you think life back then was all carpets and smiles, land sakes alive, you'd be mistaken. Sometimes, those bright patterns on the walls hid a whole lot of trouble underneath. After that spark with Victor and all the excitement in the apartment, things began to shift, but not always for the better. I remember it like it was yesterday, the weight of it pressing down on me, even when I tried to push it away with a smile. You see, not everyone was pleased with the way life was unfolding. Mama, God bless her, she wanted the best for us all, especially when it came to family reputation. She was proud of her carpets, proud of our home, but she had strong ideas about what was right and proper. When she found out about Victor, well, she wasn't exactly thrilled. "Helena," she said one evening, eyes sharp as a needle, "you must be careful. We don't live in fairy tales. You have responsibilities. A girl must think about her future." I couldn't tell if it was fear or disappointment in her voice, but it stung all the same. Papa, as usual, stayed quiet. He gave me a look, the kind that said he wanted to protect me, but wasn't sure how. He was the strong, steady rock of the family, but even rocks can crack under pressure. And Luba, sweet little Luba, she sensed the tension too. She'd tug on my sleeve and whisper, "Is everything okay?" And all I could do was nod and smile, though inside, I felt tangled up like those threads in the carpet on the wall, messy and confused. But it wasn't just family worries. The times themselves were hard, and not just because of money or shortages. The Soviet way of life came with rules that didn't leave much room for dreams. You wanted something different? You had to keep it quiet. You wanted love? You had to be cautious. People watched, whispered behind closed doors. "She's too bold," they said. "What's a girl like her thinking?" I felt the eyes on me everywhere, neighbors, teachers, even strangers on the street. It was like walking on a tightrope with no safety net, and Lord have mercy, the fear of falling was real. At night, when the apartment was quiet and the only sound was the muffled footsteps from upstairs, I'd sit by the carpet and think. I wanted to shout, to cry, to run away, but I held it in. I was scared of disappointing Mama, scared of what the future held, scared of losing the people I loved. And yet, I felt the stubborn flame inside me, whispering that maybe life could be more than just walls and carpets and quiet resignation. The carpet itself seemed to take on a new meaning then. It wasn't just decoration anymore. It was a barrier, a curtain hiding the chaos and the dreams and the fears all at once. Every time Mama fussed over it, every time she straightened it just so, I wondered if she could see what I saw, that behind those patterns were all our secrets and struggles. It was funny, in a way, how something so heavy and old could carry so much weight without breaking. I remember one afternoon, Victor came by to see me, just a quick hello in the hallway, nothing more. But Mama caught us. Her face turned pale like she'd seen a ghost, and as she said, "This has to stop." Not with anger, but with that cold finality that leaves no room for argument. I felt my chest tighten, the knot in my stomach growing. I wanted to explain, to say I loved him, that I wasn't doing anything wrong, but the words got stuck. Instead, I just looked down at the floor ashamed. That was the beginning of a long, quiet struggle. I was caught between what my heart wanted and what the world expected. I wanted to be brave, but I felt small. I wanted to dream, but I felt trapped. The carpet on the wall, once a symbol of pride, felt like a cage, beautiful but confining. I wanted to tell someone, but who? The neighbors? They'd just gossip. Mama? She wouldn't understand. Papa? He tried, but his silence spoke louder than any words. And so the days stretched on, filled with that uneasy mix of hope and fear. I'd catch myself staring at the carpet, tracing its patterns with my eyes, wondering what it would be like to rip it down and let the bare wall breathe. But I never did, because that carpet was home, messy, complicated, and full of love, even when it hurt. That's how life was back then, full of tough choices, whispered fears, and quiet strength. And if you ever wonder how someone as ordinary as me got through it all, I'll tell you, it's by holding on to the little things that mattered. Like a carpet on a wall, stubborn and bright, reminding you that even when the world tries to dim your light, there's always a way to keep shining. I still remember that day like it was yesterday, even though it's been decades since. The air was thick with summer heat, and the old clock on the wall ticked louder than usual, as if it too was holding its breath. I remember standing by the window, watching the sun cast long shadows over the street below, when suddenly everything just stopped. I swear I heard the clock freeze mid-tick, and in that silence my world shattered. It was the day I learned that Victor wouldn't be coming back. Not just for a while, but gone for good. You see, life doesn't always play fair. Sometimes the people you hold closest slip through your fingers like grains of sand, and no matter how tightly you try to grasp, they're gone. He was taken away, sent to the army, far away where I couldn't reach him. The news came wrapped in a folded piece of paper, passed quietly from hand to hand like a secret too heavy to carry. When Mama handed it to me, her eyes were wet, but her face was set like stone. "You must be strong," she said, but her voice trembled underneath. I remember sitting down right there on the floor, my back against the cold wall, the weight of the carpet heavy behind me like a silent witness. My heart pounded so loud I thought it might burst. I couldn't breathe. The world felt like it had been pulled out from under me, leaving me floating in a sea of nothingness. I kept staring at that folded letter, unwilling to open it at first, afraid of what it might say. When I finally did, the words blurred through my tears, a call to serve, to leave, to never know when or if we'd meet again. In that moment, I realized something else too. I wasn't a little girl anymore, safe under Mama's wing. I was alone, standing at the edge of something vast and unknown, and the safety of our little apartment with its red carpet on the wall felt like a fragile illusion. The dreams I'd held onto of love, of a future with Victor, slipped through my fingers like dust. I felt broken, betrayed by a world that demanded sacrifice without reason. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run away, but all I could do was sit there, clutching the letter, feeling every inch of my body trembling with a mixture of fear, sorrow, and anger. I remember thinking, how do you say goodbye when you don't get a chance to say goodbye? That question haunted me for weeks, months, years. Mama tried to comfort me, but there was only so much she could do. Papa stayed silent, his quiet presence both a balm and a reminder of how little control we had over our lives. Lupa looked at me with those big eyes, full of worry and confusion, too young to understand but old enough to feel the shift in the air. The apartment that once buzzed with laughter and hope now felt heavy and still. The carpet on the wall, once a symbol of pride and warmth, seemed faded, worn like me. That turning point changed everything. I stopped dreaming about the future for a while. Instead, I learned how to carry loss, how to hold on to the fragments of joy even when the world felt dark. I learned that strength isn't about not breaking, it's about finding the courage to keep going when everything inside you is screaming to stop. Looking back now, I see that moment as the moment I truly grew up. The innocence was gone, but in its place came a quiet resilience. The carpet on the wall didn't just hold memories anymore, it held the weight of survival, of love lost and love remembered. It was a tapestry woven with both light and shadow. Sometimes, when I sit here in Chicago, touching that little scrap of the old rug I saved, I feel that day all over again, the silence, the fear, the heartbreak. But I also feel something else. Hope. Because even in the darkest moments, there's a thread of light that never breaks. And that's the story I want to share with you. After that day, when Victor was gone and the world seemed to shift beneath my feet, everything inside me went quiet. It was like the storm had passed, but instead of calm, there was only this heavy, lingering silence, the kind that fills up every corner of a room and leaves you feeling utterly alone, even when people are around. I sat by that old carpet on the wall more times than I can count, tracing the patterns with my eyes, wondering how something so familiar could feel so different. It was still there, hanging firm as ever, but I wasn't the same. Life carried on, as it always does, whether you're ready or not. Mama kept the apartment spotless, kept the tea warm and the stories coming, but I could see the worry lines deepen on her face. Papa was quieter than ever, his hands rough from work, but his heart heavy with things unspoken. Luba grew up a little too fast, sensing the shift like a delicate breeze before a thunderstorm. I tried to smile, tried to pretend that everything was okay, but inside, I felt hollow, like a vase cracked and patched but still leaking. I often wondered where my faith had gone, not just faith in God, though that wavered too, but faith in people, in love, in the future. I wanted to believe that good things were still possible, that kindness could outlast the hard times, but some days it felt like the world had flipped upside down and there was no right way to stand. I felt lost in the very place I'd called home for so long. The carpet that once symbolized warmth now felt like a reminder of what was missing, of the dreams that had slipped away like smoke. Sometimes I'd sit for hours, just listening to the quiet, the creak of the floorboards, the muffled footsteps above, the distant hum of the city beyond the window. I'd think about Victor, about what might have been, and a wave of sadness would wash over me. But I also thought about Mama and Papa, about how they kept going despite everything, and slowly, I realized I had to find a way too. Not for anyone else, but for myself. It wasn't easy. Some nights I cried softly, letting the tears fall like rain in the dark, hoping no one would hear. But in the mornings, I pulled myself up, brushed off the dust, and faced the day. I found small things to hold on to, a book from the library, a walk in the park, a cup of tea with Luba when she came home from school. Those little moments became my lifeline, the threads that began to weave me back together. The world outside didn't slow down for me. The carpets still hung in every home, the same old patterns, the same old colors. People still chatted about who had the best Turkish rug or the brightest red one. But I started seeing those carpets differently, not just as status symbols, but as survivors, just like me. They had weathered storms, held memories, and carried the weight of lives lived fully, with all their messiness and joy. I began to understand that life isn't about never breaking, it's about learning how to hold the broken pieces and still find beauty in them. I wasn't that wide-eyed girl anymore, dreaming of faraway places and perfect love. I was someone who had been tested and changed, someone who knew that sometimes the greatest strength comes from simply surviving the silence after the storm. And so, the days turned into months, the months into years. I kept that carpet on the wall, a piece of home that held my story, even the parts one didn't want to tell. It reminded me that no matter how lost or alone I felt, I was still here, still breathing, still hoping, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. You know, life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. Just when you think the days will all blur together in the same tired routine, something small, maybe even something silly, comes along and breathes new life into your soul. For me, that moment came like a soft breeze on a cool spring morning, gentle but impossible to ignore. It was nothing big, no grand event or sudden epiphany, but it was enough to pull me from that heavy silence I'd been trapped in for so long. It started one afternoon when Luba, my dear little sister, now grown and full of her own dreams, came over to visit. She was full of excitement about a community project she was involved with, something to help new neighbors feel welcome. As she talked, her eyes sparkled, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of that old spark inside me. I realized how much I missed feeling connected, needed, useful. I wanted to be part of something again, to feel like my story wasn't finished yet. So I took a deep breath and said, "Tell me more." And from there, a tiny seed was planted. I started volunteering at a local community center, helping out with the older folks, making tea, listening to their stories, sharing a laugh or two. It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind me that I still had something to give. That even after all I'd been through, I could still be a light in someone else's day. There was one woman in particular, Mrs. Jacobs, who reminded me a lot of Mama. She was kind, with eyes full of wisdom and a voice that could soothe any worry. We'd sit together, sipping tea, talking about life and the past. She never judged, just listened, and that meant the world to me. Through her, I started to see that pain and loss are part of the tapestry of life, but they don't have to be the whole picture. There's always room for joy, for new memories, for healing. And you know what? That little carpet I've kept all these years, the one from our old apartment in Lviv, started to feel different too. It wasn't just a relic of a painful past. It became a symbol of resilience, of holding on through the hard times and coming out the other side with a heart still open. I began to think about how I could pass on that story, that strength, to others. Maybe through these stories, through these moments of connection, I could help someone else feel less alone. Sometimes, hope sneaks up on you when you're busy just trying to get through the day. You don't see it coming, but when it arrives, it settles quietly, like a warm blanket on a chilly night. It doesn't erase the scars or the memories, but it softens their edges, makes them part of the whole, part of a life that's still unfolding. I started taking little walks in the garden behind the house, watching the flowers bloom and fade with the seasons, reminding me that life keeps moving, keeps growing. I even picked up my old knitting needles again, something Mama taught me long ago. Each stitch felt like a small act of hope, a way to weave a new pattern into the fabric of my days. It's funny how sometimes the smallest steps can lead to the biggest changes. I'm not the same young girl who once dreamed of faraway places, but maybe that's a good thing. I've learned that second chances aren't always about starting over. Sometimes they're about finding new ways to live with what you've been given, with the memories, the loss, and the love all tangled up together. So here I am, still holding on to that old carpet, still telling my story, but with a heart that's starting to believe in new beginnings. And maybe, just maybe, that's the greatest gift of all. You know, it took me a long time to get here, to this place where I can finally say enough. Not with bitterness or anger, but with quiet peace. For years, I carried that weight in my heart, like a stone I refused to set down. The regrets, the pain, the what-ifs, they tangled themselves around me tighter than the threads in that old carpet on the wall. But one day, I woke up and realized that holding on to all that only kept me trapped. The past had been there, yes, but it wouldn't have the power to destroy me. I made a choice to live, to breathe, to move forward without looking back with sorrow. I remember standing in the kitchen that morning, the sunlight streaming through the window, dust motes dancing in the air like little ghosts of yesterday. I looked at that carpet, worn, faded, but still stubbornly hanging where it always had, and I thought, you've been my companion through everything, but maybe it's time to let go. Not throw away, no, that wasn't the answer, but to stop letting it weigh me down, to see it as a symbol of strength, not of loss. I took out a small box, the one I'd kept hidden all these years. Inside were scraps of fabric from that carpet, bits I'd saved like precious memories. I held them in my hands, feeling the rough texture and the faded colors, and I whispered, "Thank you. Thank you for holding my story. Thank you for reminding me where I came from." And then, I wrapped them carefully and placed them in a drawer, not to forget, but to honor the past without being chained to it. That day, I told Mama and Papa, or rather, I told myself, because they're gone now, that I was ready to let the past be past. I forgave myself for the mistakes I thought I'd made. I forgave Victor, even though he never came back. I forgave the fear that kept me silent for so long. And in that forgiveness, I found a freedom I hadn't known I was missing. I started looking at life differently. The small garden behind the house became my sanctuary, a place to plant new seeds, not just flowers, but hope. I planted tulips and daisies, watching them grow and bloom, reminding me that life is a series of seasons. Some harsh, some beautiful, but always moving forward. Just like me. And that decision, that simple, powerful choice to live without resentment, changed everything. I stopped hiding from the world and started embracing it. I called old friends, reconnected with family. I even started writing my stories down so others could see that pain doesn't have to be the end of the story. There's always light waiting on the other side of the dark. Sometimes, when I sit in the quiet of the evening, I still feel the tug of those old memories. But now, they don't pull me under. They remind me of the journey I've made, from that scared girl in the apartment in Lviv to the woman sitting here today, in her little home in Chicago, with a heart that's been broken and stitched back together, stronger than before. So, I choose to live not in the shadow of what was lost, but in the brightness of what still can be. Without pretenses, without regrets. Just simply moving forward. And you know what? That feels like the greatest victory of all. You know, as I sit here now looking back over all those years, from the cramped apartment in Lviv with its stubborn red carpet on the wall, to this little house in Chicago where I keep a scrap of that old rug like a precious keepsake, I've come to understand something deep and true. It's not the kind of lesson you learn from books or sermons, no. It's a quiet truth that comes from living through the highs and lows, the joys and the sorrows, the love and the loss. And if there's one thing I want to share with you, it's this. Life isn't about waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect conditions. It's about finding your strength in the moments you're given, no matter how messy or difficult they might be. Back in those days, we hung those carpets on the walls not just because it was fashionable, though Lord knows it was, but because it was a way of saying we're here. We matter. When you live through times when there isn't much to hold on to, even something as simple as a rug becomes a statement of pride, of identity, of hope. That carpet held our stories, the laughter, the arguments, the tears, and the dreams. And in a way, it reminds me of life itself, full of patterns, some bright and beautiful, others dark and tangled, but all woven together into one fabric. I've learned that holding onto the past too tightly can weigh you down. It can keep you stuck in a place of pain or regret. But letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means making peace with what was and finding the courage to keep moving forward. The past is a part of us, but it doesn't have to define us. That's the hard-won wisdom I carry now. Maybe it's true for you too. Maybe you're waiting. Waiting for a sign, a change, a break in the clouds. Waiting for a moment when everything feels just right before you take that step or speak that truth. I'll tell you what, sometimes that moment never comes. Sometimes you have to choose to move forward anyway, even when the path is uncertain, even when your heart is full of doubts. Because that's where the real living happens. And here's another thing I've realized. Strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting up one more time than you've been knocked down. It's about carrying your scars with dignity and letting them remind you of the battles you've won. We all have our own rugs on the walls of our lives, the memories, the losses, the moments that shaped us. They're not always pretty, but they're ours. And when we learn to embrace them, to see them as part of the tapestry rather than something to hide, that's when we find true freedom. So, if you're listening to my story and feeling a little stuck, a little scared, or maybe just tired, I want you to remember this. You don't have to wait for everything to be perfect to start living your truth. You don't have to carry your burdens alone. Reach out, share your story. Let your rug hang proudly on your wall. Because that story, your story, is a testament to your strength and your courage. Maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop waiting, to stop holding back, to step into the light of who you are, scars and all, and live with all the messy, beautiful, heartbreaking glory that life has to offer. That's the truth I carry in my heart, and it's one I hope will help you find your own way. Now, before I let you go, I want to speak to you. Yes, you, sitting there, listening to the story of an old carpet on a wall and a life wrapped up in its threads. You see, this isn't just a story about the past. No, it's about today, about the moments we carry with us, the memories that shape who we are, and the hopes we still hold on to. Life isn't a straight line. It's a winding path full of surprises, losses, and sometimes beautiful second chances. I've told you about my young heart, full of dreams and love, about the pains and the quiet victories that followed. But what I want you to feel most is this, that every one of us has a story worth telling. Every rug on a wall, every scar, every laugh and tear is a thread in the fabric of our lives. And when we share those stories, when we let our hearts speak honestly, we connect in ways that go beyond time and place. Sometimes, I find myself wondering, do you think true love really does come back? I ask myself this because, well, I can't help but feel sometimes that Victor, my first love, my first heartbreak, remembers too. Maybe it's foolish, maybe it's just a wistful thought from an old woman with too much time on her hands. But sometimes, when the evening is quiet and the wind rustles through the trees outside, I swear I hear a whisper carried on the breeze, a soft echo of a promise long ago. And that thought, that lingering hope, it keeps me warm on the coldest nights. It reminds me that love, in all its forms, doesn't just disappear. It changes shape, it grows into memories, into lessons, into the quiet strength that carries us through the hard times. It's in the way we hold onto the little things, like a piece of carpet thread or a faded photograph, and find meaning there. So, I want to ask you, dear friend, what memories do you hold close? What stories are woven into the walls of your own life? And more importantly, what are you holding on to that maybe it's time to set free? Because sometimes, letting go is not about giving up, it's about making room for new things to come in. This story, my story, is a gift I'm passing on. Not just to remember, but to remind us all that no matter where we come from or what we've been through, we are connected by the threads of hope, love, and resilience. And that connection is what keeps us moving forward, keeps us reaching for the light even when the shadows fall. Thank you for listening, for sitting with me on this porch, for sharing a piece of your time and your heart. I hope you take something from my story, a smile, a tear, a thought that lingers, and carry it with you as you walk your own path. And if you ever find yourself feeling lost or alone, remember this: every thread, every story, every love, they're all part of the beautiful tapestry that makes us who we are. So tell me, do you believe true love should come back? Does it find its way home, no matter the years and miles between? Sometimes, I think it does. And sometimes, just sometimes, I think Victor's heart is still whispering back to mine.